Really appreciate everyone for coming in. It means a ton to have you a part of this journey. It started 3 years ago. Actually, it was April of 2016 when Ben Murphy made the call to Don Thornton about the idea. And I talked to Don, and he said, well, come see me. And I said, when? He goes, this week, we're ready to come. And so I flew out, actually, to Phoenix, Arizona. It was your father-in-law, right? Yeah, so his father-in-law's house out in Arizona. And we laid out what this could potentially be in terms of creating a trucking futures market. I think there were and are a number of folks that are cynical about, A, the opportunity to create futures in freight, and trucking freight specifically, but also what this will mean in terms of the industry. And I think I would say that regardless of whether futures and freight futures are successful, that transparency is coming to this industry. And it's not just this innovation in terms of what we're working on today, but it's the digitization, it's the Uberization, the electronic networks and the digitization that we all recognize is going to create more transparency. What we're focused on today is a market that will become more transparent and will create more awareness of what's happening in the market currently, but also what is going to happen. And I'm excited to be a part of that journey, and I hope that you are as well. A couple of folks that I personally want to thank for participating, certainly our partners, DAT, Claude and Don, and the collective team of DAT that have worked to ensure that the index itself is transparent, that the index methodology is understood by all participants in the market. And I think that it's a pretty big ask to go into a company like DAT and say, we want to work with you, and we want to take the methodology and make it transparent, because you're a technology company, and it's a big lift to take something that's commercially and make it so that the regulators will understand the methodology and have it. And I think they certainly deserve a lot of credit in seeing the opportunity and the need to ensure more transparency in the freight market. And I really want to thank them and really appreciate you guys joining us on this journey. Let's give them a round of applause. When I had started to put this idea together, one of the things that was very apparent to me is that we needed an index partner that was trusted. And I did a lot of research. I had been out of the industry for about 11 years. So the industry had evolved. Alan last night said it hadn't changed very much, which is in many ways very true, but it had also evolved. And one of the things that I wanted to ensure is whomever we worked with as an index partner would be the trusted source, would be the benchmark index. And the research, in fact, MIT did a study back in 2014 based on Coyote's data. And actually, Coyote actually paid for this, although MIT didn't disclose it, except accidentally did it on one of their servers that I happened to find. They had gone and studied all of the various indices that index partners that were listed in freight, and found that DAT's was the most relevant, the thickest, and the most reliable in terms of tracking the market. We also engaged Stifel to study the trucking market and the trucking indices and look at how they tracked the publicly traded companies. And this is the part that I think is most interesting, because it is true that we are going to be working on spot rates and providing hedging instruments around spot rates. But it is also true that the broader public trucking companies, the trucking companies that have a lower percent of their business exposed to the broader spot market, actually have a high correlation in terms of rate movement as what does the spot market. And their index, DAT's index specifically, tracked it very efficiently and highly, highly reliable. So they are an important partner, and we couldn't be on this journey without them. The other thing that when we started to look at a futures market, one of the first things as an entrepreneur, you think, well, I want to own it. I want to go out and create it. And we realized that that was going to be an expensive proposition. We estimated at best case it would be about a $40 million investment. And that's if we could get the regulators to actually support it. The other thing about futures markets is you need a broader liquidity environment. You need people that will trade it, and you need to access the global markets. We went out and talked to, went out to a number of exchanges. I went to one exchange in particular and talked about trucking. And the person in charge of new products looked at me throughout this conversation, looked at me and said, just don't think trucking's a big enough market. And I looked at her card, and she was responsible for agriculture and forestry and fisheries products for this exchange. And I pulled out this chart of futures markets, and I pointed out the trucking market, which was $726 billion, and I pointed out her market, which was $400 billion, and I walked out of the room. And so I think the idea that the trucking market is not big enough and could not support a futures market is incorrect. I also think that the innovation that's taking place in this industry is profound. We're going to hear later today of a company that I've been around trucking, as I've said, my entire life. And whenever I would tell people that were outside the industry that I was involved in trucking, they would always say, so like my family's in trucking, like J.B. Hunt, because they are the trucking company in the minds of people outside the industry. They're the big guys. And Shelley Simpson, the chief commercial officer, is going to speak with us today about their view of what's happening in the market as well as their view of futures. And I think that's important because J.B. Hunt is an organization that has transitioned from a traditional over-the-road for-haul trucking company to being the largest intermodal. They were the first trucking company to see the intermodal opportunity and have built out a substantial 3PL presence. And 2 years ago launched J.B. Hunt 360, which is the largest digital brokerage app in the market. And I think that's pretty interesting that they have, in many ways, looked at disrupting their own core business and are not concerned about what it does to their core business because the market is just so massive. This is in no ways, anything that goes on in innovation is zero sum. It's not taking a pie and disintermediating the pie. It's actually growing it together, and I think that's pretty interesting. One of the things after had gone and visited with various exchanges, I did come across Nodal as an introduction. I was sort of excited to hear that they were a power market, but I thought, well, they're a power exchange. What does that have to do with trucking? And when I learned that power and how power is traded, it had gone from a deregulation in the 90s and had become a liquid futures market, it struck me that power being capacity constrained, the fact that there are a finite number of power plants in the United States at any moment in time, and there's a finite amount of demand, reminded me very similar to how the trucking market works. Our commodity is time. How much time does it take to move a freight shipment from point A to point B? That is the finite commodity that we're trading. And power is about time. How long does it take to produce a watt? Power is not only capacity constrained, but it's also geographically traded. And one of the things that I was really inspired and excited, and Danny, I don't know where Danny's at, there you are. Danny and Dimitri were in this meeting, and they could tell you, for the first half, it was uncomfortable because I didn't understand a thing that was being said about futures. It was way over my head. But about halfway through the meeting, there was this moment for me where I realized I was sitting around people that were far more brilliant than any of us in terms of how to build a futures market. And they had taken a cold start exchange in 2009 and had scaled it to be one of the largest power exchanges in the world. Then about 3 months later, they got bought by Deutsche Börse, which was scary for us because we had made a big bet on them. But we were reassured that Deutsche Börse, being one of the world's largest financial exchanges, is committed to this project. And I do want to thank you guys for your commitment here. We are excited. I think most importantly, when you're building a new market, it's important that you have executive sponsorship of the marketplace. And that was the thing that, of all the things that was important to us in picking Nodal as a partner, and I actually have been asked this by other exchanges, why did we pick Nodal? And it comes back to the fact that the CEO of the exchange and the executive team, the C-level team, is personally involved in the success of this market. And I think that is what you need. To build a successful futures market, you need to have liquidity, and liquidity is created by confidence that other people will trade the market. And I think Nodal's demonstration of their commitment to this is going to be instrumental in the success of the market and hopefully the confidence thereof. They also have a reputation for being quite conservative in terms of how they do it and quite precise in their clearing methodology, which should also give additional confidence to the market. So I am very excited to welcome you all here. It is a big day. I should caution to say why we have a lot of confidence about the long-term success of the trucking futures market, that this is not an IPO, that I don't think you can derive any sort of success metrics out of how well the market performs today or next week or next month on the long-term viability. I've learned it takes about 3 to 5 years to get any substantial liquidity before a market really builds. In fact, some of the trading folks that have worked the floor of the Chicago Board Exchange or the CME will tell you that there are days when they launch new contracts for weeks at a time, but they're just sitting around reading the newspaper and waiting for that first trade. Hopefully, I'm hopeful and optimistic that we will have the first trade today, but we'll see. But it is certainly not an IPO, and I don't want anyone to get the idea that this is going to be a big show in terms of trading. So it might be quite slow today. But thank you for coming here. I'm really humbled by your commitment to us at FreightWaves, the team at FreightWaves. Thank you. And everyone, I really appreciate your participation. Thank you.